Stokes, Croft, central Bristol, known for its displays of street art and street drinking. Not for its archaeology. But this little grass square known as Turbo Island has not only been chosen for a dig, the local drinkers are being recruited as the archaeologists.
Is that like the archaeology with lack of technology? We're here with just trowels and people, as you see. We're going to dig down, see what's to be found when we go down in the deep underground.
The whole muddy idea is the brainchild of urban archaeologist Rachel Kiddie.
We use archaeology to find out about Romans, Victorians, medieval people. So why not apply archaeological theory to homelessness and see what we can gather about social exclusion and marginalised lifestyles?
So Rachel's brought together a team of experienced archaeologists,
You make a great table.
students and anyone else who wants to join in, especially if they live on the streets.
It's quite interesting because basically the archaeologist gives us, like people from street, something better to do than just sit down somewhere and just getting pissed, for example, you know. And it's quite interesting, you can learn some stuff.
Everyone knows they won't be digging up the next Tutankhamun. The question is really whether a handful of street drinkers can be at all useful in the world of archaeology, or will Rachel's idea just sink in the mud?
I'm just really glad that I chose to make archaeology of homelessness in Bristol my specialist subject, not something in the Caribbean.
The three-day dig is being funded by the Council for British Archaeology. And whilst this all-inclusive approach is extremely unconventional, the weather is doing what it always does.
One of the things that we didn't expect was the fact that the bad weather would actually be a discouragement, simply because people can't get clean. There's nowhere to go to clean off, dry off and so on if you're homeless. So that's been the reason why some people have decided not to get involved in the actual digging, because they've got nowhere to go afterwards to wash. It's a real breath of fresh air actually working on a site like this, which is so undisciplined and uncoordinated. It's so unlike anything I've done before in that sense, and it's great, I think.
Some join in, some just watch, but between them they dig 3 different trenches, carefully working their way down through layers of recent history.
That's 1901 Edwardian penny coming out of this layer now, so I'd be happy to say that the bit we are currently digging was just before that.
On the second day of the dig, the invitation for anyone who wants to join in adds an interesting new dynamic.
Turbo Island has historically always been a problem for the police in terms of street drinkers and homelessness and drug abuse. So the idea of getting involved in a project to find out the sort of longer term history about it is absolutely fascinating, and we're really pleased to be involved.
The police and the drinkers don't actually dig the same trench at the same time, but the collaboration does appear to be making a difference.
If people can gain their trust, there's a lot less hassle rather than the resentment. And now they're here digging with homeless people, trying to find out the past of the area, which is good.
Fingers and toes are suffering, but other than that, I'm fine. It's been great to interact with some of the homeless guys there, but everyone's enjoying themselves despite the rain and the cold.
Perhaps not surprisingly, much of what they find is related to certain well-known social activities. But there's nothing new about the habits of the locals. These pieces of clay pipe were probably used for smoking tobacco as long ago as the 1700s.
We also found some 18th century beer mug yesterday, so people have been smoking and drinking here for knocking on 300 years.
Frustratingly, just as they get down to a more interesting depth, they reach the end of the 3 days, and it's time to fill the trenches back in. But the job's not over yet. These may look like bags of litter, but they're now artefacts, and they need to be cleaned and sorted. Although Bristol University is only a short walk from Stokes Croft, culturally they're worlds apart. Rachel gets the new recruits straight back to work. They have to scrub everything clean, being careful to keep the finds from each layer of the dig separate.
I think people will definitely learn about something about the history of Stokes Croft. You know, how it was ages ago, what it was, why it was, you know. I think people will learn. I don't know if they will learn from this stone something, but...
There is a lot of what you and I might call rubbish here, but below a certain depth, they're finding what seems to be the remains of a house that was destroyed in the war.
When we dug down, we actually found an ash layer where the building was burnt to the ground, and these things have actually come out there, and we've got bits of window glass, clay pipe, a little bit of shell. Yes, quite surprising.
Hi guys. Nothing really good here.
If anyone can help to interpret historic objects, it ought to be the Archaeology Department's very own Mark Horton.
This is a bit of what's known as mocha ware. And these patterns, which looks as if they're beautifully painted, were actually made by a sort of combination of tobacco and urine that was put on the surface, and it created these spiral designs, these sort of brachiating designs. It's called mocha ware, and it's was sort of standard beer mugs of the 18th century.
Mark knows the historical stuff like the back of his hand, but when it comes to the more recent artefacts, it's the street drinkers who turn out to be the experts.
We have a story-cut,
Right.
and drug services provide them to homeless people so they can cook the heroin up before they inject it, rather than use the bottom of a tin can,
Right.
which has got loads of ink on it.
Yeah, which then creates...
Which contaminates the injection. Bristol do not issue them.
Right.
So it's come from outside Bristol.
So it's evidence of incidents of migration of homeless people.
Yeah.
Isn't that fantastic? Yeah.
They've been teaching Mark Horton, Bristol's most eminent archaeologist, about the finds. He was genuinely interested and honest about the fact he had no idea what he was looking at. That, to me, is the point about this whole project.
Archaeology is one of those unique sciences that allows people to participate in the process. And that participation gives such added value, like we've seen here, but also enables the archaeologists, the academic archaeologists, to understand what they're finding.
Where do you draw the line? I'm like saying, right, that's not archaeology. If it's in the ground or it's been left behind, there's going to be archaeology at some point. Whether it's like a day later or whether it's like 500 years later.
So do you consider yourself to be an archaeologist?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm a homeless archaeologist.
Now, I would say this is one of the most important archaeological projects that's currently going on in Britain at the moment.
There are preconceptions, and they do affect the way that we treat people, and they do create invisible barriers. So yes, perhaps I am a little bit crazy, but I think you've got to break through those barriers somehow, and if you can do it by digging in a hole and washing everything you find, then that's one way of doing it.